De aquella viene la revolución, para que se asustan será para mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
La bestialidad imperialista. Bestialidad que no tiene una frontera determinada ni pertenece a un país determinado. Bestias fueron las hordas hitleristas, como bestias son los norteamericanos hoy, como bestias son los paracaidistas belgas, como bestias fueron los imperialistas franceses en Argelia. Porque es la naturaleza del imperialismo la que bestializa a los hombres, la que la convierte en fieras sedientas de sangre que están dispuestas a degollar, a asesinar, a destruir hasta la última imagen de un revolucionario, de un partidario de un régimen que haya caído bajo su bota o que luche por su libertad. Y la estatua que recuerda a Lumumba, hoy destruida pero mañana reconstruida, nos recuerda también en la historia trágica de ese mártir de la revolución del mundo, que no se puede confiar en el imperialismo, pero ni tantito así, nada.
What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Welcome to episode 35, Unmasking Imperialism, exposing imperialist propaganda in mainstream media, exposing all of the bullshit we get from CNN, Fox, mainstream news that lies, and especially about China, especially about our sisters and brothers in China, the People's Republic of China. And today, Socialist China, an eyewitness view, a perspective about why China is socialist, anti-imperialist, revolutionary, from two comrades based in the United States who have actually been to China, spent time in China, and debunks the Western left narrative that China is imperialist, that it's putting people into debt, that it's just as bad as the US. So today we're going to be talking about the PRC, why it's important for communists to defend China, to go and visit China and see China for yourself, to see how many great things have been done in China. Shout out to everybody who's watching and listening, Oliver Smith, Big Teal, Steve, to Mod, to Non-Standard Proletarian, to everybody who's there. And joining me today is a good comrade, Comrade Elishuva, aka Comrade Gillis. Make sure to subscribe to the comrade. Their channel is in the chat. Link is below. A 12-year communist who joined the movement in 2009. At 17 years old, shortly after the 2008 financial crash, Elishuva spent their Occupy Wall Street years in the Maoist movement of the Austin, Texas area, where they spent much of their time in the protest scene. In 2013, however, Elishuva met a Chinese communist at their university who made them question their Maoism. Shout out to that random Chinese communist, by the way. I'm sure they're probably base as hell. In 2014, after graduating from college, Elishuva moved to China to teach oral English. They spent the next 5 years living, teaching, traveling, and learning all across China. So they know China, they've seen China, they've lived in China. And since returning to the US in 2019, Comrade Elishuva has been active in the Marxist-Leninist movement, as well as the Communist Party USA, CPUSA. Shout out to CPUSA. How's it going, comrade? Doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. That's quite an introduction. Thank you.
No problem, comrade. It's great to have you on, and it's always, you and I have been speaking for quite some time, and I follow a lot of the stuff that you put on your channel, and so do you with my channel. I support your work, and one of the things that I like about your content and your political views in general is that you tend to view both sides of things and be unity oriented. I feel like a lot of times, especially in the era of social media and the left in general on the internet, people kind of dig their heels into their respective positions and take a side in a camp and are like, I'm this team, I'm blue, I'm red, I'm Yankees, I'm Mets. And you kind of take a rational approach and say, look, there's good in this, there's good in that. Let's work together and unify at the end of the day. So I do appreciate that, because there are unfortunately some people on the left on YouTube and elsewhere who really become dogmatic about things. And I don't think you're somebody like that. And I think undoubtedly your experience in China and seeing the amazing work of the Communist Party of China has played a role in that. So I just wanted to give you that shout out. But before we get into talking about the Western left or the imperial left perspective about China, why don't you tell us, give us a brief overview about how you ended up in China and what made you transform from being a Maoist to a ML China supporting communist, which is something that we don't really see that much.
Right. Well, as the introduction said, I'd been in the Maoist movement since around 2009, into my early college years. They were really the only group of communists outside of, anarcho-communists that were around at that time in Austin, at least in any significant number. So that's what I went to. But, I met this really amazing Chinese woman, communist, and things I would say to her, like I would speak very proudly and greatly about the great proletarian cultural revolution, and she would look at me with disgust and say, why do you believe that was such a good thing? And I would say, if Mao was alive today, he would hate the way China. What do you mean? We uphold Mao Zedong thought. It was common little statements like that, and then understanding that she knew way more about like dialectics than I did. She'd been learning it since high school age, and I was a baby in comparison. Communist, it was like a toddler going into a university classroom and trying to say, I know what's right, and then laughing at you because it's ridiculous. And so that's sort of where my attitude sort of changed. And then talking to the same person, I started to actually date this person while we were still in the United States. And that was part of the reason why, after I graduated, I went to China. Was I knew I could get a job over there teaching oral English. I wasn't sold on China or anything at that point, but I was very much young and ready to graduate and live my life and go out and maybe see if this relationship thing could work. And I went over there, and the relationship didn't work, but China did. And I still know this woman to this day, and we're still good friends, and I still talk to them all the time about, the goings on internationally about politics. They're still a Communist Party member, and a mother now, which is crazy to think about. But, it's just so, because of her, I was introduced to party people when I went to China. And me moving over to China and, having that inroad in of already knowing people before I went there and being able to get a job. And I was very lucky. I was lucky to be able to go to university and get a degree. I was lucky to be able to go over to China and get a great paying job with such a low cost of living and high pay compared to what I was used to in the United States. And, that's when things started shifting in my head. It was just everyday life things for me, just seeing things every day that is a given in China that would be, monumental to a normal working class person in the United States. Like, guaranteed having a place to live, having a home, guaranteed having a job, guaranteed having food on your table, guaranteed having water, clean water, guaranteed having electricity, things that are not guaranteed here in the United States. And then that's when things started to shift for you, when you actually start to experience it yourself, when you start to speak to the communists that actually live there, and they are looking at you using a revolutionary science to tell you why you're wrong. And and you can't ignore them. And then I think some of the most touching things that really solidified my opinion about things like the Cultural Revolution and the era of the Gang of Four and Lin Biao was the stories of people who were child Red Guards during that time, who are grandparents and great-grandparents now, who still cannot sleep throughout the night because of the things they were forced to do as children. And it's these things that make you sort of rethink, why am I so gung-ho, excuse the language, gung-ho about supporting the Cultural Revolution and the Red Guards? Like, what are they really? What do they mean to the Chinese people? What does it mean to the people who experienced it? And what is the legacy today? Why is Deng Xiaoping so beloved? Why is Xi Jinping so beloved? Why is Deng Xiaoping almost as beloved as Mao Zedong, and is considered a much better politician and a much better economist than Mao Zedong? Mao Zedong is not considered a good politician in China. He's considered a genius, a revolutionary, a philosopher, all of the things that you would expect Mao Zedong, but they don't consider him a great politician because by the time they took state power in China, he was an old man. And he, and it's these kinds of things that I started learning, and then started learning the language, and I started trying to learn how to read. And then I started reading Mao Zedong in his language. I started reading Zhou Enlai, Liu Xiaoqi, Lin Biao, the Gang of Four literary critics out of Shanghai, And this is what started changing my idea about China. And
what's up?
The rest is history.
That's really cool because you get a different perspective when you learn the language and actually read Marxist and revolutionary texts in the language and understand the culture, how Marxism is adapted to Chinese civilization and adapts it to the culture, adapting elements of Confucianism, whether we like it or not, adapting elements of Chinese culture in general, philosophy, Sun Tzu, different elements of Chinese civilization that have been incorporated into Chinese Marxism. And it's a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, I do not speak or read Chinese, but it's something that I can only imagine helps you elevate your understanding of Chinese socialism. And when I went to China in 2019. I'll show some pictures later on in the stream from my time. I went with my girlfriend Ophelia, who you all have seen on the stream. Me and her went to China in 2019 for May Day. It was really beautiful. We went to Beijing, and then we went to this small town called Jing'anshan, which I think you've been to as well, Comrade. And it's a beautiful town. It's a town where it was one of the earliest formations, I believe, of the Chinese Red Army or the PLA, or I forget which entity.
It was one of the, actually, it was one of the last surviving locations of the first socialist state to ever exist in China, called the Jiangxi Fujian Soviet, which was established in the mid to late 30s for a very short amount of time in Fujian, Jiangxi, and parts of Hunan. And over there in Hunan and Jiangxi was where Zhu De, Zhou Enlai, and Mao Zedong were. And that was the last place over there in western Jiangxi, called this little mountain called Jing'an Mountain, Jing'anshan, and where they had their last stand. And that's where the Long March began. So there was the martyrs at Jing'anshan, and the people who survived began the Long March. And that's whenever Mao Zedong and his thoughts of uniting the peasantry and the workers, but mostly backing the peasantry, he became supreme in the party. That became the main line. And after the end of the Long March, that's when his famous protracted People's War began. And I think it was about 12 years after he began the protracted People's War that they marched. 12, 15 years later, they marched, or they succeeded. They proclaimed the People's Republic. And,
it's a beautiful place. And
yeah,
it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a place that when you go to the base of the mountain, you see all the names. And you can feel like the weight of their sacrifice, of their martyrdom. It's a very special place. And it's also It has museum and all sorts of things. It's also one of the main headquarters for the party. It's a place where every party member, once they graduate from the youth setup into the main party, or if you just join the main party later in life, you go there and you go through like sort of a camp, and you also pledge your loyalty to the party there. So everyone, if they get the chance, pledges their loyalty to the party there, but not everyone gets that chance. They do it in their hometown, but it's like a very ceremonial place to do it, and it's a very hallowed ground, to say the least.
Yeah, it's amazing when you actually go there. You see the passion and the pride that the Chinese people have for their nation, their revolution. Me and Ophelia got a chance to go there, and we're going to share some pictures of that later on. Before we get into that, I want to share some information. Also, by the way, my beautiful cat, Sandino, who's also joining us for the podcast.
Viva Sandino!
And he unfortunately didn't have a chance to go to China, but we'll probably take him next time we go. But I want to share a clip, Comrade, from our favorite leftist YouTuber, Vosh.
Oh.
And I say that sarcastically. He has this really disgusting video about China. It says China, the left should be harder on China, and basically calling for regime change, calling for imperialist maneuvering against China. So I'm going to play this clip. And the reason I'm playing this is because this is the common theme, the common narrative that a lot of the quote unquote Western left has about China. So I'm going to play this and get your reaction.
Why is the left so easy on the CCP, Vosh? I think that the left, I think that disliking China should be a nonpartisan issue, personally. I think the right and the left should unite in our dislike of China. Seriously, I completely believe that, yeah. Now, I don't think we should go full neocon warhawk or anything. I'm not advocating for tariffs, which don't work, or war, which not only doesn't work, but would be destructive and horrible. But I think that in terms of, like, opposing China or being antagonistic to them, why are we giving up on this? What is there to defend in China? They're bigger than us. They're going to be stronger than us economically within a few decades. They're highly militarized, ethno-nationalist, extremely racist, xenophobic, highly imperialist. What are we defending? What element of China are we uncomfortable criticizing here? Well, some people are going to avoid attacking China because they don't want to sound like a Republican, and there are also plenty of left-leaning people who don't really understand how bad China is, so they think it's kind of like a Republicans only attack China because China's on the left sort of situation. But now, in reality, China is actually like a kind of a haven for the right wing. The government is right wing. They're explicitly authoritarian and anti-degeneracy, and they allow capitalist interests to run amok as long as they serve the interest of the state. I mean, it works perfectly for conservatives. The reason Republicans are against it is because they like having a national enemy to focus on. We should be against it because we principally disagree with the stuff the Chinese government does. It's true, China is better at building suburbs, and that is, unfortunately, one of the benefits of authoritarianism. One of the problems that America has is that every 4 years, our entire national catalog gets reset, you know? Every 4 years, our government reshuffles. It makes it really difficult for us to form any long-term plans. When it comes to the Chinese Communist Party, if they want to do something that's going to take 20 years, cost a ton of energy, a ton of time, a ton of lives, they'll just do it, you know? Like, they can just do it. They don't have to worry about political efficacy or, like, getting elected again next term or anything like that. Unfortunately, a lot of CCP projects are also built on slave labor. Yeah, or at least just about next to it.
So again, this disgusting piece of shit, Vosh, who
has
no idea. It is. It's very hard to watch.
I don't know how you went and found that. How you had the patience to go and cut that up and get it ready for the stream. I don't know how. I don't give these people the time of day. It's like when Lenin said, "Why should we even write back Kautsky?" You know, like that's how I feel about these people. Why should we even? But we have to. We have to talk to them, just like how Lenin had to reply to Kautsky because Kautsky was the most popular Marxist in the world at the time. And right now, Vosh is one of the most popular streamers on the internet, and unfortunately, we have to address this. And this isn't just an idea coming from people like Vosh, these radical liberals with a radical coat of paint. It's also coming from people who call themselves communists, which is baffling to me. Everything he said is wrong. It's not an ethno-state. China is a multi-ethnic nation. Let me think. It's not racist. I don't know where he got that from. I can't think of any way that is racist. Not systemically. I'm sure that people have their individual prejudices, but that's not really in the scope of what we're talking about. Is it, all those things that he said, it's anti-degeneracy, good.
Right.
Fucking degenerate. What does that mean? Does it mean that what is anti-degeneracy? Yeah, they don't support CP like you do, buddy, but, like, what? They're anti-LGBT? First of all, no, they're not. I lived there with great respect and dignity for many years, openly.
Yeah.
And like there's literally famous LGBT people that are a part of everyday Chinese culture. Like Jing Xing, who is a trans woman and a former PLA soldier, a ballerina, a comedian, one of the most famous talk show hosts in the country. So I don't know what you're talking about, anti-degenerate. I really don't know what that means. They're not imperialist. In order to be imperialist, you have to have the base economy of capitalism. So I guess it comes down to that question. Is their base economy capitalist? Well, no, but that's a whole entirely different question of the understanding of productive forces and what exactly socialism is and what it isn't. I can tell you now that there's no list of demands for socialism. There's no bullet list. There's no definition. We're Marxists. We're anti-essentialists. We understand that everything is in motion and that the qualities of things change as time changes. Nothing is essential. But
yeah,
what do you have
one thing I thought was really interesting is that in a way he kind of admits that socialism is alive and well in China without having to say it directly, because the fact that one of the things about socialism on the path toward communism and moving away from capitalism is the fact that you have a dictatorship of the proletariat, democratic dictatorship of the proletariat. The working class is in control of the state and uses the state as an instrument to suppress the ruling class. And in China, they don't play games. They're not going to play around with bankers and investors and people who bring no value to the economy. If you fuck around in China, you're going to get locked up. You're going to get sentenced. You're going to get executed if you're a banker who's taking...
There's a good chance they'll put a bullet through your head. Like, that's not even a joke. Like, if you fuck around the Chinese people, there's a good chance you're going to get a 7.62 round to the skull. And it's just the way it goes. And the thing about China is that it is highly democratic. Like he said, what are they going to hold elections? Yeah, actually, they will hold elections. I've literally seen China on election day. It's great. They go and elect their local officials. It's how it works. It's a very bottom-up process where it's the democratic process starts at the bottom and they vote their way up, much like the internal politics of a communist party, the democratic centralism. It's much like that, and it's very interesting. Like Xi Jinping, for example, after being denied 9 times even membership into the party, once he actually was allowed membership into the party, even though his father was a great famous revolutionary general, he didn't get in his first 9 times. Once he had to be elected. He had to get into the good graces of his local community and be elected into his position. And it wasn't until years and years of hard work that he moved his way up the ranks in the party to get to where he is today. And that's the way that it works in that system. You don't have to come from money. I mean, that's not something that happens, you know. And you know, like you said, he's saying it, and he's saying a lot of things without saying them. Like he said, why do we have to defend them? They're big, strong, and powerful. Well, yeah,
Right.
thanks to socialism. Look how wonderful their system has worked. Whether you like it or not, they're surpassing everyone in the world. And they're lifting billions out of poverty. And I am a communist for one reason and one reason only: to uplift the masses and to move history forward. And that's what China is doing. And if you don't agree with that, then I don't think we're on the same page. And that's why there's a lot of people I can get on the same page with that don't subscribe to my ideology, because they understand, you know, the position of the world, our position in the world, and that no, our enemy isn't China. And if anything, we can learn from China. Our enemy is right here, right in front of us. We're living in the core of it. And we need to stop spending so much of our energy doing the footwork of imperialists, being useful fools of the empire, by saying things like what Vosh says, or saying like things like Han supremacy, or China is genociding Uyghurs, which has just been admitted by the Associated Press to all be fabricated, just like the other day. And it's just, whenever you're taking an anti-China stance, it's intellectually dishonest, because you obviously haven't studied the Chinese system. Otherwise, you would know why China does the things that they do in Africa. Look at Xi Jinping's new global strategy. You can read about it in The Governance of China in all 3 volumes, and you can understand the intentions of China and Africa very simply and through a Marxist justification. And you don't have to supposition. You don't have to rely on second, third-hand articles from some Maoist in his basement in Michigan. You don't have to do that. You can actually ask them what they're doing, and they will tell you. It's not some big fucking secret.
Right.
No, and
yeah, and I think it also, like the stuff that Vosh was saying, it also represents the racism and chauvinism that many white leftists in the first world have toward China in particular, and Asian countries, the same with DPRK, where they think that any Asian country that is building socialism, they're all just brainwashed. They're not democratic, right? They don't have their own elections. They don't think for themselves. They're just following the orders of their great supreme leader. And they really talk like this. Like this is the way that they act, that China they claim China doesn't have elections. They claim that they don't even know that there are multiple political parties in China aside from the Communist Party.
There are 8 legal political parties in China. 8. And only one of them is communist. And they're all a part of the National Front. And also, like you said, you were saying just before, just before the political parties, you were saying,
like the racism that Asians are just all brainwashed. Yeah.
To think that these people have no agency. That's what you're saying. You're saying that these people have no agency, that they're just a part of some kind of hive mind. This is, to me, evident of this Anglo-liberalism that's innate in the West, especially in the English-speaking West, that is this individualist way of thinking that there couldn't possibly be a society that has a more collective way of thinking about the world than we do. That would be they'd be some kind of crazy robot society. I think the biggest way to tell the difference between the way Chinese people think and American people think is to look what the American dream is and look at what the Chinese dream is. What is the Chinese dream? The Chinese dream is to uplift everyone within the Chinese nation and the entire world out of poverty and into the future. That is the Chinese dream. What's the American dream? You and yours, right? Get you and yours. That's what it is.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I want to play a clip. This is from CGTN about it's an overview of some of the accomplishments of China in the eradication of poverty. And it's funny, before we started the stream, me and the comrade were joking how some ultras or liberals are going to say, oh, this is a state propaganda. But before, my message to those people is, before you think that, why do you believe all the CNN articles or Fox or MSNBC that say China has a quote unquote Uyghur genocide, that China is forcing, killing people and all this stuff, you'll believe them. But if the Chinese people want to speak for themselves, then that's propaganda. So I want to play this clip and get your reaction, Comrade.
光点亮人世间，传递着现代文明的温暖与明亮。但在广袤的乡村田野，曾经有成千上万人生活在贫困的黑暗中。
18岁，第一次看这个电视机是啥样子的东西。我从现在开始，这个一生当中，自己的这个房子里头能不能看到一次电视？
走出大山，去城里读书，
全面建成小康社会，一个也不能少。共同富裕路上，一个也不能掉队。
2012年底至2019年底，7年时间，61320小时，9348万人，平均每小时超过1500人走出贫困。
The fact that China has been able to move hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and that China is now a very clear target to fully eradicate extreme poverty in China in 2020. So this is the most important contribution.
2020年底消除绝对贫困，这是中国的伟力，更是世界的奇迹。
Beautiful stuff. China is doing amazing things. For those of you who are listening, by the way, in the video they talk about how in 7 years, 93 million people were lifted out of poverty. That's 1,500 people per hour that were lifted out of poverty in China. And as of 2020, in the winter, China has eradicated absolute poverty, something that has never been done in the history of humanity. We have to really stop and think about that. And if you're really a communist, if you're about bringing power to the working class, this is what revolution is. And this is something that I stress because so many people get caught up, especially within the Maoist crowd. They get caught up in the guns and the guerrilla fighters, in the fighting, the invaders. And that was certainly a part of the Chinese Revolution, a very bloody part, and a part that people look back with very dark memories, a part that people do not want to live. But if you go to China, like both of us have, and you speak to the Chinese people, overwhelmingly, their favorite part of the Chinese Revolution is building hospitals, building schools, building roads. So even though it's not the sexy image of the guerrilla fighter with a gun or shooting people, we have to get out of that mindset and realize that this is revolutionary socialism in action. So I wanted to get your reaction, Comrade, to those accomplishments.
Well, yeah, you said it so well. I mean, if you're a communist and you don't believe that lifting 1,500 people an hour out of poverty is something that we should aspire to do, but I don't think we can be on the same page. I don't think that if you don't understand that this is a positive leap for humanity and something that's never been done, I just don't understand what you're hoping for. And when I see this poverty alleviation and I see the successes it has done, I don't think, how could they have been more anti-revisionist about it? How could they have been more pure socialist about it? I think, how can I do that here at home? How can I do that in Texas? How can I do that in the States? How can I, help extend the same privilege that I personally experienced over there and I've seen? And how can we extend that to the United States? And we can. And maybe it'll take different forms, whatever that may be. And different people may take different paths. That may be the truth. But what I do know is that we have the potential to make a better world, and we need to stop ignoring and demonizing China for what they're doing and start learning lessons from them. Because otherwise we're going to be left in the dustbin of history while China moves forward.
One of the things that I found really powerful in visiting China with my girlfriend was that you will see families. For example, we went to Jiganshan, which is one of the revolutionary historic sites. You'll see an entire family, a generation of families. You'll see the grandparents who saw everything. They saw the founding of the People's Republic, the imperialist war, China before socialism. And it was horrible. I mean, there was the century of humiliation that they called it, from 1830s, 40s to 1940s, when the country was forced to consume opium, when it was controlled by European imperialist powers. People were subjugated on their own land. There was signs in parks that said, no dogs, no Chinese in China, right? And so it was horrible. So to go from that to then, and being illiterate peasants in the countryside, to then having their grandkids go to space, go be part of the space missions, developing entire cities, like it's just crazy.
I met the first Chinese person in space who went to space.
Wow.
Young Li Wei. Yeah. I met him. He knew my boss at this kindergarten that I worked at, and he came over to see the kids, and I got to meet him. He's short, like 5'4". I guess he had to be short to sit inside that capsule. He was a really nice guy though.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we've seen it now, but like you said, it's from 1949 to today. That's nothing. China has done what it took centuries for the West to do and surpassed it in less than a century. How did they do that? Well, it's a little thing called socialism. Just saying. I don't understand. What is the purpose of being a communist? It's to uplift the most oppressed people and move history forward, right? I mean, I guess we all have our different intentions, but just dialectically speaking, it's for the masses of society to take power, specifically the working class to take power and to move towards a better future. And how do you do that? By uplifting people out of poverty and by not running your society based on profit, but running your society based on of the social needs of the many. And I mean, what can you say? China's done it better than anyone. They've surpassed the United States in the size of the economy. They're pushing the United States out of place and their hegemony out of places like Africa. They're buying up Western debt and alleviating debt for all these countries, and they call it imperialism. I don't know.
Anytime China builds like a train station or anything to help people in the global south, they brand it as imperialism, and that's part of that strategy. It's like projection in a way. What they're doing is they're projecting everything that's true about the Western imperialist powers onto China. It's some really disgusting gaslighting shit that's going on. And I want to play a clip. This is about China's poverty eradication internationally to kind of combat this idea that China is impoverishing the world and building imperialism. So I want to play this clip and get your reaction.
截至2019年底，中国在非洲援建了24个农业技术示范中心，惠及50余万当地民众。根据世界银行“一带一路”经济学专题报告，共建“一带一路”交通基础设施项目，将使相关国家760万人摆脱极端贫困，3200万人摆脱中度贫困。但2020年，新冠肺炎疫情大流行突然袭来。据世界银行预测，到2021年底，全球可能多达1.5亿人陷入极端贫困。
For the first time in 30 years, poverty is rising.
中国在全力控制国内疫情的情况下，付出艰苦卓绝的努力，确保实现决胜全面建成小康社会、决战脱贫攻坚的目标。 但这并不是中国扶贫事业的终点。中国在“十四五”规划中提出，在消除绝对贫困后，将巩固拓展脱贫攻坚成果，继续提高人民生活水平。
人民对美好生活的向往就是我们的奋斗目标，努力让人民群众的获得感成色更足，幸福感更可持续，安全感更有保障。
让电灯点亮每个黑暗的角落，让遥远村庄的稻麦瓜果能够运往全国各地，让教育、医疗等公共资源惠及每个家庭。这是中国书写的美好故事，更是人类反贫困史上的宏伟篇章。在全球减贫路上，中国将主动担当作为，以中国智慧和中国方案，和世界各国一起协力前进。
China doing amazing things internationally. If it wasn't for Chinese socialism, the people of the sanctioned nations of the world, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, Zimbabwe, Yemen, everywhere, all over Iran, would have such a difficult time trading to survive. And these imperialist sanctions that are being imposed on anti-imperialist countries, the only reason they're staying afloat, one of the big reasons, is help and aid from Chinese socialism. So China is not only taking care of its own people, but it's extending its hand internationally. 150 million people are at risk of falling into extreme poverty by the end of this year. And we've seen it. I've even seen it here in California. I've seen it. People are losing their jobs. People are losing education. People are into debt. So many problems internationally, and China's still going out and supporting the masses all over the world. So to claim this is imperialism is just really disgusting and inaccurate by the Western left. So maybe, Comrade, you can tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this notion that China's imperialist, the debt trap, and what it really is all about.
Well, first of all, China doesn't put people into debt traps. That's the thing.
Right.
They take people out of them. And I don't, building friendly relations with countries, buying up their Western debt, alleviating it, giving them interest-free loans, giving them the technology and experts to engineer and build things that they couldn't otherwise do. It sounds a lot like the Soviet Union doing their international duty back in the day. And to me, that's what it looks like now. I hear there's this one comrade of mine who considers himself a Maoist, but they're more like a Pantherite, but they're a really cool person, and they ask all the right questions, and they always have a dialogue trying to reach truth. And he always asks me, what does China do now that China doesn't help arm guerrillas across the world? How does that help our revolutions in other countries? How does that help revolutions in other countries? And I can say, well, they for how they're helping revolution in other countries is by combating imperialism in the most brilliant way possible. And it's through peace, and it's through alleviating poverty, buying up debt. Now they're saying you don't need the imperialists to be here anymore. We're not going to put you in that same debt trap. We're actually going to help you. And now these nefarious loans that you were getting from the IMF and from Western countries before, you don't have to deal with that anymore. Now you're going to deal with someone who actually genuinely, selflessly wants to alleviate poverty worldwide, for the simple reason that they are socialists and they are communists, and it's their international duty to do so. Can people not understand that? I mean, what benefit is it for China to help build a railway in, say, Namibia that's owned by the country of Namibia? I mean, what? Right. There's no benefit to China other than friendlier relations, and also helping Namibia get off the back of Western capital. And guess what? In 2019, Namibia, who had since its revolution always advocated for social democracy and capitalism, adopted socialism with Namibian characteristics because of its relations with the People's Republic of China. So that's what the internationalism can do for revolutions in other countries.
That's a great point, because I've gotten that as well. A lot of people have asked me, like, why did China stop supporting armed revolutions across the world? And
same reason
therefore it's not in right. Exactly. And that's what I tell people. It's like in the 90s, during the special period, once the Soviet Union was overthrown, dismantled in the coup, then Cuba wasn't able to do that. DPRK wasn't able to do that as well. And it's a totally different situation. Like, we're not in the 60s anymore. We're not in the era of like going to the hills and the countryside and picking up an AK, and we're not in that era anymore. And I feel like it just alludes to this idea that like people are so stuck in the 60s. Like, they think that it's going to happen exactly the same way as it did back then. And I think Chinese socialism in general moves and adapts with the times. And I think in 1978, with reform and opening up, they were able to see this down the line. They're like, look, if we don't come up to the edge of the water for a breath of air, restructure temporarily, right? Because this is also like, you have to keep in mind the long-term plan. I think that's the brilliance of Chinese socialism, is like they're looking at things not only in the present and the future, but long-term, 200 years, 300 years. They have a full thought-out plan of how to reach the lower stages of communism. And it's a really important thing to keep in mind. It's a very Marxist understanding of socialism. And when I meet younger Maoists or people who are really radical and well-intentioned, like I don't want to just shit on them, because I was like that too. I was like, why isn't China supporting all these revolutionary movements abroad? Like, what's going on? It's like, we're in a totally different world. Can you imagine how the US would react if China was supporting the Haitian resistance, right? Can you imagine with arms? Or if they were supporting the resistance anywhere in the global south? Immediately NATO would come in, immediately the war would start. And one of the concepts of Sun Tzu of socialism is understanding that, knowing what hill to die on. You can't fight every war. We're not in the 60s anymore. And I think that's what I tell people. China, in building an alternative to the World Bank, to the IMF, in building an alternative to the big oil companies, to all of these things, they're setting up the long-term game. They have the long-term game in view. And I think this is one of the best things that China can do. And so it's just crazy. I mean, I think a lot of times too, people really they only focus on aesthetics. Like, a lot of times when I tell people that, there are things that Deng Xiaoping did that were good, that saved China economically, that the Gang of Four period was not a good time. The Cultural Revolution, especially the later stage, was not a good time. And you tell people this in the first world left, and they're like, what? But they only think of it aesthetically and ideologically, right? They believe by saying the right words, by wearing the right outfits, by doing these aesthetic things in appearance, that's building socialism. They think of it as like whack-a-mole, right? That it's like this reactionary pops up, get the hammer, smash it. That's how you build your way to socialism. And it doesn't work like that. You have to radically build up the means of production, and that includes moments of advance and retreat. It's kind of like when you're swimming. I don't know how to swim, by the way, so maybe it's not the best analogy, but you have to come up for air, right? Or there are moments where you can't just be going at it the whole time. Like, there's moments where you have to take in air and then you can go back under. Come up, get some air, go back under. You can't just pummel your way through. Right, exactly. I mean, I think coming up for air is a good analogy. You really have to come up for air. When ideology meets material reality, plans never keep 100%, right? Like, plans fall apart as soon as reality hits. And then you have to adapt going to that. You can have a plan and you can have an aesthetic in the 60s that they really thought that things were going to look like this and things were going to be like this and culture was going to be like that. And this is how everything was going to be back in the 60s. And then history moved forward. History isn't cyclical. It moves in a spiral. Mm-hmm.
Moves in a spiral. I mean, from the oldest Rebbe's to Ramiro right here, it moves in a spiral. History moves in a spiral. Not
Right.
necessarily.
Yep. No, exactly, and that's really the fundamentals of the dialectic. It's like understanding that as times change, you have to adapt with the times. You're not going to use the same tactics over and over, and you have to understand the new conditions. So I'm glad we were able to talk about that. And in the last 15 minutes or so that we have left, I want to share some pictures of my time in China, and then maybe you can offer some comments on it. As I'm showing these pictures, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your reaction being in China was? Because, like, for example, in mainstream media, we get the image of like smog and it's dirty and this disgusting stereotype that Chinese people are dirty. China was one of the cleanest places I've ever been to, first of all.
Yeah, Beijing's a super clean city for sure. They keep Beijing that. Well, the thing is in China, they love creating jobs, right? They love creating jobs for people, and one of the jobs that they create are street cleaners and street sweepers. The old Chinese workers and peasants red army flag. You gotta love it. But yeah, they street sweepers and street cleaners. So all of the streets and everything are always kept like in tip top shape there because people always have jobs to be able to go out and do it. And a lot of the time, the people who get those jobs are former homeless people and people who weren't able to get employment before and things like that. And now it's a good paying job, a living wage. And yeah, they got those. I have a big thick one from the 60s. I have a big thick one from the 60s. It has a little bit more than the quotations, some extra stuff in it.
That's awesome.
I have like pins from the 70s and 60s and stuff. I love that kind of stuff. I get why people love these. Hey, the Great Wall.
That's me on the Great Wall.
He's looking out for the Huns.
Yeah, it looks like I'm like chilling in front of a bodega. I'm like, yo, what up? Yeah, me and my girlfriend Ophelia we got to walk through the Great Wall of China. It was a really cool experience. Were you able to go there or not?
I was trying to get to the bodega, and I down in Chinatown.
I somehow ended up in the Great Wall.
I don't know how I got here. I just asked for directions from the dude in Chinatown, and I just showed up here. I don't know how it happened. It's a beautiful place. It really is. I think that one of a single spark can light a prairie fire. That's that famous quote is at the top of Jinganshan. That's not technically the top. That's another spot, but I love that. I love that torch. You can see it, and it looks a lot bigger in person for sure.
It's huge, man.
It's so I have like this weird like I don't know if it's not really a phobia, but I get kind of nervous around big statues. Yeah, the people dressing up in the revolutionary clothes by the big Jinganshan communist red flag thing. Yeah.
Yep. It was cool. We went there for everybody was dressed up and the tours, so you see the families.
You must have been there a year after I went, or a year or so after, a couple years after I went, because I went not long. I went, and maybe a year later I came back to the States. So yeah, I've been to places like Xinjiang. I've been to Tibet. I've been to Inner Mongolia. I've been to Guangxi. I've been to the autonomous regions. They're amazing. I didn't see any genocide happening.
Right.
I was asking them, so aren't they genociding y'all? And they were like, oh, nope.
Yeah, we would see actually like all over China, one of the most popular cuisines are like Xinjiang, Western Chinese, that Uyghur cuisine. Everywhere you see the small businesses popping up.
Xinjiang La Mian, their noodle. Yep. People love it. They cook with cumin when no one else in China really cooks with cumin, so it's a very special flavor. It's awesome, and it's always halal. So I mean, most of the time it's usually kosher. So
yeah,
because Chinese people love to eat pork, but look at that.
Well, this is my girlfriend Ophelia. One of the cool things that we realized when we were in China, so if for those of you who are watching, this is a huge replica of the Mexican silver dollar, of the peso. And so we're just walking in this random small village in China, Jing'anshan, and we see this huge peso. We're like, what the fuck? Like, it's so random, right? We're like confused about that. And we're learning about the history. We have to keep in mind that the Mexican revolutionary Mexico from 1910 to the 30s, like that was the height of the left in a lot internationally. So I think they were using the Mexican peso as currency within the little commune areas that they were establishing in China, including this area. So that was pretty cool.
I had no idea. That was like the age of Cardenas, right? How do you say his name? Is that right?
Cardenas, yeah.
Cardenas. Yeah, that dude. He's the guy who came up with Pemex, right?
Yep, exactly. So I was like, wow, like just the history of internationalism.
Yeah,
I thought it was really cool.
Well, during did you climb? You climbed all the way to the top, obviously. Only because I went with a bunch of older Communist Party members, and that's how I got to go. I went on a trip with those dudes. And the only ones that went to the top were me and one of the sons who was in the YCL. And if you notice at the base of Jing'anshan, there's actually a YCL, or not YCL, that's what it's called in the USA, the CYL, the Communist Youth League, the Chinese Communist Youth League. They actually have an office right at the base of Jing'anshan where the mausoleum is, right before you climb up to the top, that you can see their flag sitting over there. They got a little office over there.
That's awesome. Yeah. This is one of the coolest. I forget how it's pronounced, base or when it's like carved into the wall. So for those
embossed,
really embossed, yeah. So you could see like Marx and Lenin in the background, and it says CCP, and it shows people in the Communist Party of China taking their oath with the fist up.
Yeah,
that was one of the pieces of art that was really cool. Just a lot of cool stuff like that you see everywhere.
Did you get to go see Mao? Did you see his body?
I did get to see it. That was a really powerful.
I couldn't.
How was your experience?
Well, it was during the national holiday and upcoming the National Congress in 2018 when I went to Beijing. So it was like during a national holiday, like the October 1st holiday time, and also I think the 18th Party Congress was coming up. So it was so freaking crowded. But I waited in line that entire time. I did it for hours and hours to go see him, and it's like it's hard to believe that body was once used to do the things that it did, right? That's the thing that, like, where the experiences that body had it was kind of like crazy. That it looks like the day he died. It's crazy, a little waxy, but
yeah, it was crazy. I had never seen like an embalmed body in person before, and seeing how many people were there.
Embalmed body?
I haven't actually. No. That was my first time.
Open casket. I grew up in a Catholic family, and we saw, and I've seen plenty of open caskets. It's not nice. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's kind of trippy. This was a school in Jing'anshan. It has Lenin, Engels, and Marx in the front. The other side it has Mao and Stalin. And it was really cool. You see this kind of stuff everywhere. Like you see people still oppose. I think that was a really cool thing about China is like people, as well as admiring Mao, and people sure do love Mao. People still study Marx. They still study Lenin, Engels, like Stalin. They're still popular. People still know about them.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's required. You have to start learning about socialist history in middle school. You start having to learn about dialectics in high school, even if you're not a member of the youth league. If you're a member of the youth league in the party, then you get like double everyone else. Yeah, and there's stuff like that everywhere. And there's like, shops where little old ladies are selling like big old portraits of Stalin and stuff. It's really cool. It's a really special place, a very communist place.
This is a escalator in one of the gift shops we went to, and it has all the Chinese revolutionary posters. By the way, shout out to my lovely girlfriend Ophelia, who corrected me. My fault. Mexican currency was actually one of the principal forms of currency circulating in the 19th century in southern China and the world. A lot of feudal Chinese landlords kept their wealth in Mexican silver. Very interesting.
I had no idea. Well, there's the connection right there.
It was cool. We were just kind of like thrown off because we just see this huge peso. We're like, what the fuck?
Latin America, you see Latin America in Jinganshan. You didn't expect that, did you?
Right, and it was cool in Jinganshan. We got so many. The escalator with the gift shop. It was really cool. We got a lot of cool socialist gifts, and it was awesome. What was your experience like being in Jinganshan? Because for me, it felt like it was one of my favorite moments as a communist to see like a small town that's keeping all this history alive.
Yeah, it was one of these places that the entire time I was like, because I'm kind of an emotional person, so the entire time I'm like fighting back tears and shit. Especially when I start seeing the names of people, I'm like, oh God, and their ages like 20 and 23 years old and stuff, and I'm like, my goodness, you can just feel there's like this pressure in the air. There's like this pressure in the air, and you can feel like the weight of the sacrifice and what it means to this nation that's now lifting billions out of poverty. Because of the sacrifices of these kids, they're kids,
right?
They're young, and like I didn't see many ages in there that were, yeah, and those were just the ones who were able to get their busts made. The many more names on there of the faceless people, and it's just like it's really hard to And in the museum, you can see all the famous generals and their busts and stuff. And there's a big old picture, or there's a big old statue of Mao. A couple big old statues of Mao over there. But
it was great. It was cool to see that because I had never, like, growing up in the U.S. and being around the Chinese American community, like to see these replicas of Mao being protected and cherished by the Chinese people, something that was really cool. This is probably the one where you were thinking about, right?
Yeah, there's that one, and then there's one I think where he's a bit younger that's further back up inside the museum, outside of it, but like it's in between two buildings. I forget. It's been a while, but yeah, that's one of them for sure.
It was really cool. I was telling Ophelia, I was like, I would love to retire here, honestly. How cool.
It's a beautiful mountain town. It's like, and like the restaurants there and stuff are in like these, like a lot of the houses are old school houses and stuff, and they're really cool. It's a really beautiful little and it's like on this like little lake, and it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful mountain village.
Even the nature and seeing how pristine, like this is a shot I took of a waterfall just in the middle of the place, like nothing too special. How clean, clear, and well protected the environment is. It just debunks this racist myth that China is like dirty.
In Chinese cities, you'll find giant green belts. Like I went what they call mountain climbing, which is really just like hiking in the hills, like what they would do in LA or something. But hiking in the hills of Guangzhou, in the middle of this giant city, Guangzhou, like 26 million people. You can just go on a mountain nature hike. And I remember getting it towards the top of the mountain, looking around and seeing all the city around you. It's like, whoa, we're in the middle of the city. What are we doing here? This is wild. It feels like I'm in the countryside right now. Yeah. It's really cool what they do with nature and green belts within cities and stuff. And they really try to, because a lot of the people spend their whole lives in these cities, and a lot of them never leave. But they all get to experience nature because of these well-preserved green belts within cities. And they're all over China, all these big cities. It's really cool.
Most definitely. And by the way, shout out to Comrade Dude who's watching, listening. Comrade Dude, speaking of Mao, do anyone support people having a little red book or buying it? Just to kind of like wrap up on this point, Comrade Elishuva, I wanted to ask you, learning the lessons from Mao, like why don't you give us your analysis from the time of Mao and Jing'an Shan, right? Because that's like the early part of the Chinese Communist Revolutionary. Now to 2021, seeing China building skyscrapers, lifting millions out of poverty, and helping internationally people around the world. What is your overall analysis of China's role in the world and your reaction to Western quote unquote leftists who claim China's imperialist, that claim we shouldn't defend it? What reaction do you have for those people?
Well, I mean, the reaction I have to China is that it's now a world leader, not just in socialism, but just in general. And that whether we like it or not, China has chosen its path and it's moving forward. History is going to move forward, and China is going to move forward without our permission or anyone else's. And that's what I think the Western left needs to accept that sooner rather than later, because no matter what their opinion is, no matter what your opinion or my opinion is on it, they're going to move on without us. And if we can either hop on board with their international solidarity or be left in the dust. And when it comes to these people that are anti-China, what I have to say to you is, you don't know what you're talking about. And if you did a little bit of investigating, you would probably find something, you'd probably find yourself thinking a little bit differently. And, you know, this is why I say the anti-China left in the West is intellectually dishonest, because you cannot come to the conclusion of being anti-China if you have properly investigated the situation. There's no way. It's not possible. Not if you're using dialectical materialism, not if you're a Marxist. And que onda, Chavelo? That's Comrade Dude. That's my man.
Comrade
he's Salvadorian. Yeah, he's Salvadorian.
That's what's up. Shout out to Comrade Dude, supporter of the FMLN and the revolutionary movements around the world. It's funny because when I go to Latin America, and like there's this one path, right? There's like the quote unquote Gonzaloists or whatever, the ultra.
They're the ultras of the ultras.
The ultras of the ultras, the king of kings, the ultras of ultras. And they say that everyone hates China, that China is like imperialist. You talk to actual communists and revolutionaries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and everyone has top respect for China, Chinese socialism. Fidel Castro said before he passed away that Xi Jinping is one of the most principled communists and most capable communists of the 21st century, somebody to look out for.
That means a lot. That means a lot to me coming from Fidel. I mean, if Fidel says that about someone, I tend to trust Fidel's judgment. I mean, that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong.
Same here, and it's interesting because one thing I noticed. I used to live in Ecuador a few years back, and one thing I noticed is that under the government of Rafael Correa, who is a good president, I supported him. He considered himself democratic socialist. He wasn't necessarily ML, but he did a lot of really great things for the people of Ecuador. And he traded a lot with China. It was one of the first times that Ecuador traded with China a lot. And they collaborated a lot on building infrastructure development. And there were quote unquote Maoist groups in Ecuador that were getting NGO money from all these institutions from the West. And they were using this, they would tag up on the street like Ecuador, Colonia de China, like colony of China. They would draw like racist depictions of Chinese people. And it was really disgusting, but it was all these petty bourgeois college kids who read like one Maoist book or whatever and just became Maoist. And it was just interesting to see that, you know.
That's the majority of them were petty bourgeois college kids that I went with, that I hooked up with back in the day and became a Maoist. I grew up in a working class background, but you know, so those are the types of kids you're around, well-off kids who had money to fucking blow, and that's what they like doing. And their hobby was activism, which is so weird to me. It was like a hobby for them.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And shout out to Guantanamera. I love your name, by the way, Guantanamera. I'm Chinese, so I always defend China. It's cool to meet fellow, communist comrades who are also Chinese, defend their revolution, their people, because I know it's not something that's easy to do. I just did a stream a few days ago with a good comrade Sa about DPRK in Korea and how there are also Koreans who defend the DPRK. That's a very beautiful thing. I wanted to ask you as well, comrade, what was your transition like going from being a Maoist to a ML? Because that's something we kind of talked about in the beginning. Like, it's not something that it's so common. Like, one of the things I noticed is like, because people add an M after ML, they think it's like the next final stage of Marxism, and they treat it almost in a very religious way, right? That this is like the ideology. What kind of like, and I know you did a video or a stream a while back, Unlearning Maoism. Why don't you also tell us a little bit about that process? Because I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, unlearning Maoism came with learning Marxism. That's what did it. Having a chance to sit down with serious Marxists and not be alone in studying, that was a big thing. It was being around serious communists and Marxists who genuinely wanted to, teach me and wanted to bring me out of this place of ignorance, because that's where it came from. It was Maoism is a dogma. It's you learn some catchy phrases that sound nice with big words, nice big alienating words, and you learn to stick by those phrases, and you say them again and again. You learn certain positions, and you learn these are the correct positions, but you don't understand. You never learn the revolutionary science behind what you're doing, and so it to a point where it becomes this essentialist, dogmatic, almost like a religion. Like they treat it like a religion. When what brought me out of it was people saying you need to stop thinking so dogmatically and start using dialectics. And it took me years and years and years, even while living in China. I called myself a Maoist. I think I called myself a Maoist for almost most of the time I was still in China.
Wow.
I still called myself a Maoist. But I was pro-China at that time. At that time, I was pro-China. I still had these hang-ups on anti-revisionism and revolutionary purity. And it just, what busted me out of it was just learning more and more about what makes up the revolutionary science. Where do these correct ideas come from, Mr. Mao? Reading Mao in Chinese and seeing what he has to say, and understanding that a lot of the things that you thought were Maoist weren't really Maoist at all. They were really like Lin Biaoist or Gang of Florists. Weren't, and understanding that these ideas brought on all of this destruction. But I think really what it was is learning Marxism is what got me to unlearn Maoism. And that came with learning the basic fundamental method of analysis, and that being the dialectical method. And learning that really, it just opens up your eyes. And I don't think that there's anyone who can honestly, being intellectually honest with themselves, can hold that ultra-left position if they truly understand the basis of a revolutionary science. Because if they did, they wouldn't be able to come to the conclusions that they do using dialectics. It's just not possible. So I really implore these people who are Maoists and consider themselves Maoists to maybe, check yourself a little bit first before you call yourself a Maoist, and do a little bit more studying. And then once you do, more studying to what Mao was all about, and you sort of look at theory for the 21st century and not get so hung up in 20th century stuff, maybe you can call yourself that, maybe a Maoist of a new type. And I think there are Maoists of a new type, and I think that those people do exist, and I think that they're really bad and that they have a lot of potential. It's just the problem is with a lot of these people is that they get hung up in the dogma. And when you invest, look, I got Mao tattooed on me. I was invested in the Maoist movement. I wanted to call myself a Maoist long after I was no longer a Maoist. And it's because this sunken cost fallacy people have in their head. They put so much time into the movement and into this certain part of the movement, and realizing that you're wrong is a scary thing. And having to realize that all the time that you sunk into it, you have to really come to terms with yourself that no, that wasn't a waste of time. Okay, as much as it feels like it right now, it wasn't a waste of time, and that we can learn a lot from that. But I think a lot of it has to do with I've invested a lot of my identity into this Maoism thing, and now if I say that I'm wrong now, I'm going to look foolish. And I think that's what it comes down to for a lot of people. I think a lot of people who are growing out of it and getting deeper into Marxism, they start to realize that. And the only reason they stick around with their labels in the first place is because that, you know, that's been a part of me for so long, and separating that from myself is going to feel weird and I'm going to feel kind of goofy, you know, and you don't want to feel like that. You want to feel like that you do know what you're doing, but in reality, none of us really do.
Of course. And that's part of Marxism, is like understanding that you're never going to that knowledge is not static. Like, we can learn everything there is today about Marxism, and by the time we're done learning that, there's going to be more. Like, it's cumulative. There's always new things that are adding to it. And in terms of the identity thing, I think it's really fascinating, because I've noticed the same happens within religions as well. People who are evangelical, Protestant, Catholic, whatever it is, they have this identity, and I see that happen even with older folks in my family who are like, I'm Catholic, I'm born and raised Catholic, I'm this. And when they realize that, you know, there are different perspectives out there, they kind of refuse to let go of that, because it's so essential of their identity. And Marxism is all about being able to question everything, even if it hits close to home, to question it and to really understand, to shake the foundations of something, to see if it's stable or not, if it holds. The truth is our guide. Like, Marxism is about understanding the truth regardless of where it takes you. Like, one thing, when I was in Nicaragua, this one campesina lady I spoke to, she said something that was a really interesting expression. She said, you know, sometimes people on the left, they cover the sun with their finger to act like it's not there. And I kind of think about that with, like, you know, if that expression, okay, if I think there's no such thing as the sun, I can just cover it with my finger, what I'm observing, and it's not there anymore. But it's still there, regardless of whether or not we're not seeing it. If we cover it with our finger, the sun is still there, you know. And I think that happens a lot of times with people who call themselves Maoists, where, like, they're seeing all these great things China is doing. They undoubtedly, like, they see that China is trading with anti-imperialist countries. They're lifting people out of poverty. They're still passing on the traditions of Marxism and education, but they're just covering that. They're like, blah, 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 blah. You know, they're just kind of like, and so I compel people to really like study China today. Go to China. I think going to any anti-imperialist socialist country.
You can't go la 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 when it's all around you. That's what happened to me. It was all around me. I couldn't do this anymore. Otherwise, I'd be walking blind. So.
Right, exactly. No, well said, Comrade. I think we'll have to wrap it up there. Before we head out, is there anything that you're working on that people should look out for? On your channel.
This coming Friday, Dust James is coming on the channel, and we're going to be talking
Shout out
about.
to Dust.
We're going to be talking about communists in the country.
Cool.
Rule organizing and stuff. So that should be pretty cool. And also coming up, you should be seeing the San Angelo Solidarity people maybe come through, and as well as me continuing the series of the Chinese system. The next one, which was voted on, is we're going to be talking about the new global strategy, which should be very interesting for people who are wanting to learn about the Chinese system. It's Xi Jinping's term, new global strategy, and new world global order are the two terms that he likes to use. But we're going to be talking about that, so that should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm loving that series. It's great. I think what I like about your channel is, like, you're not just talking, because there's so many left channels out there that they're not actually like putting forth Marxism or educating people. They call themselves Marxists, but they're just talking about other Marxists, and it's kind of like drama. You're actually like bringing information to people, you know. So I really appreciate that.
That's kind of the whole point of why I wanted to do it. Like, I put all this time into studying all these things and learning all this stuff. Like, I can share this with people free of charge. Why not? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I put in all that work. We might as well put it out there and make it easier for other people to consume the information in whatever way I can.
And one other topic I would like to suggest, if you have time, that I think is really interesting. I would like to see if you can, as a anti-Zionist Jew, pro-Palestinian Jew, maybe do a video or a series about China and Palestine, because I know some of the comrades are talking about it in the chat. To be 100% real with you, I'm not really fully well versed on understanding the different positions that the Chinese Communist Party has taken on Palestine. So maybe that would be an interesting video or series to do something like China and Palestine, a history. I think that would be really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure, because there is a history of China in the past during its three worlds theory era of having some detrimental relationships, to say the least. And so that's certainly something that needs to be spoken about, because it can't be ignored. And I think that there's somewhat that there's a lecture I saw from Nick Manias for the students and youth for a new America. He did a about Baathism, right? About Baathism. And he said inside that lecture that there's something that the Arab socialists and the Baathists, they just did better. They just did better than the communists in the Middle East during this time. They just did better. They knew what the people needed, and then that's why they were so successful, as opposed to the detriment that the communists faced in the region at the time. So I thought that was very interesting what he said there, and I think that my opinion about the Palestinian and the Arab struggle in general is really colored by Arab nationalists, and that's people like Nasser and Gaddafi and Michel Aflaq and people like that are really who color my opinion about that region.
Most definitely, yeah, and I think that's a great point of view. Yeah, obviously, I also, as a pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist communist, I think that throughout history we can admit whenever the Marxist or communist movement has made mistakes in terms of its position, even within Latin America. Yeah, of course, and even within Latin America, one of the errors that at one point China was trading with Pinochet and Chile. We can talk about Angola. So I think it's also important to point that out, right? That we're not just kind of like, hail China, like, there are positions that we have to be like, okay. So I look forward to continuing that series. Anybody who wants to catch Comrade Elishuva's series, by the way, please subscribe to their channel. The link is in the description and the comments. We spoke with Comrade Elishuva, aka Comrade Gillis, 12-year communist to join the movement in 2009. Great channel on YouTube. Also, Comrade Elishuva has been active in the Communist Party USA. Shout out to CPUSA. Shout out to everybody out there who's watching and listening. It was really dope speaking with you, Comrade. I hope you have a great week. And we're going to go out to some revolutionary music from the People's Liberation Army of China called When That Day Comes, about don't fuck with China, basically. It's a really beautiful video. When That Day Comes, a military song. Peace out, Comrade Elishuva. Peace out, everybody who's watching and listening. And I hope you have a great week.